Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we're going to look at two topics. We're going to look at this new book that Michael Moore has out, and this is the guy named Thomas Paine at True Pundit. This book out about how we dismantled the FBI in our pajamas, and then we're going to look at Rod the Rat and see what he's up to. Is that cool with you, Thomas?
That's cool with me, Betsy.
Okay, so let's get started with True Pundit. Now, on Truth News Headlines the other day, I posted an article which takes you to his book. And I posted it there so everybody would have a little bit of foundation before our Thomas Paine in the Ass of the Globalists gives a review of the book and the topic. And that's you, Thomas. Tell us, what happened to Osama bin Laden?
Well, Betsy, I'm not going to read that book. And the reason I'm not going to read the book is because I've seen the articles that True Pundit has been posting, which is basically old nonsense of propaganda that is so absurd that if you would believe that for 1 second, then you would not be dismantling the FBI. You would be working directly for the FBI.
Are you saying that he works for the FBI?
I'm telling everyone that whoever would write a book saying they dismantled the FBI in their pajamas is completely ridiculous and off base, because the FBI is stronger now than they've ever been. And when you hear this person, as he goes on, and in articles and in interviews that I've seen, that he worked for those very agencies who he now dismantled. No, he did not dismantle them. They pretty much dismantled him. Not only that, his concept that Osama bin Laden hid out in Iran for 10 years with the approval of Saudi Arabia and Iran working together, being guided by George H.W. Bush, is just about as deaf, dumb, and blind to the situation in the Middle East and between Muslim countries as they could possibly be. To expect that Iran, led by Shiites, is going to basically protect and cover up and go to war with America. If you had Osama bin Laden in your country, you were at war with America. Didn't anybody mention that $50 million bounty on his head? If he was in, and this, I'll get to it in a minute, what I believe that Mike Moore, Thomas Paine, is actually saying here, which is completely wrong and is very much part of what the FBI, the rogue CIA, is doing in Iran and had been doing all along. But first off, let's just go back to the facts. The facts are Saudi Arabia would have never protected Osama bin Laden wherever he was after the supposed defeat of the Russians in Afghanistan. Absolutely not. He was in fact kicked out by his own family in Saudi Arabia. He had to go to Sudan. He invested all of his money that he had left, which, by the way, we gave $4 billion to Al-Qaeda, and $40 billion was given by Muslim countries during the time that supposedly he ran it. But, I mean, I'm just going to jump to the conclusion here. If you don't look at Osama bin Laden and see that he was dying in the first videos made in his Al-Qaeda, the camp, the foundation, some called it the list, which is what Al-Qaeda means, and it was founded in Pakistan, remember? And so when he started making the first films, who was making those films? We had given $4 billion to Donald Rumsfeld, we have pictures of Donald Rumsfeld with his arm around Osama bin Laden, his favorite Salafist jihadist, who was there in Afghanistan to fight the Russians. And of course, Osama bin Laden, believed that he wasn't there to fight the Russians. He was there to support radical Islamic terrorists called Salafists, which is the Sunni form of radical Islam. Well, to imagine that he went to Iran, which is the home of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Shiite forms of radical Islamic terrorism, and that he was protected by them, is completely absurd and not possible. Not politically, not religiously, not economically, not socially, and he was the hated enemy. Remember, Iran and Saudi Arabia to this day hate each other so bad that that's what the war is really all about. The war is when they are not killing others, they're killing each other. And that's the Sunnis and the Shiites. So Osama bin Laden was, of course, a Sunni, and his relatives are of the royal family. And as we've said many times before, George H.W. Bush stayed with the Saud family after he was the president. He lived in their palace and actually received his daily presidential wrap-up intelligence reports there and had to build a skiff there. And people were coming and going so radically from that particular palace that later John Brennan made sure to establish a quick visa system for anyone coming through that palace, and they were almost considered to be politically immune, diplomatically immune when they received these expedited visas. And I believe at least 12 of the people cited who were all wrong. None of those people actually had anything to do with 911. But 12 of the Saudi nationalists got their visas through that expedited center that was set up by Baker and then carried out and manned and worked by John Brennan, who was in Riyadh when the bombing happened there. He was radicalized at that time. So to imagine that America's alignment with the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, which could not be any thicker, as thick as thieves, was then coordinating with Iran, and I'll explain that in a minute, because that's other horrible things that are wrong about what Mike Moore, Thomas Paine is saying. He's got it so wrong, it's like insanely wrong. It could only be because it's part of a disinformation plan. It's the tail wagging the dog. And why this is coming out now, I'll explain that in a minute. Well,
go ahead, explain it now.
First off, let's go back to the other thing I was going to explain a minute ago. Look at Osama bin Laden's 5 or 6 films, all produced by the CIA. Remember, they were all produced by the CIA. In that camp in Afghanistan, we filmed him with the people that then we accuse him of basically being the mastermind and controlling these other people who were with him in that camp.
Well, I mean, really, how stupid do they think we are? When we saw all those films, of the camps and Osama bin Laden, right, there's somebody out there with a camera filming their training, and they got out alive to post it in Western media. Gosh, they think we're stupid.
Oh, they know we're stupid because people believed it. And Thomas Paine, Mike Moore is basically become the mouthpiece of the official version, which is just disgustingly wrong. So let's go back. Osama bin Laden, look at him from the earliest films. And who was there? Rumsfeld was there. This was the CIA filming Al-Qaeda. Those weren't propaganda films. You must be out of your mind. Matter of fact, I could go into why the proof of all of those films are fake just by the way that they were verified and the way that the CIA verified and the way that they tried to say that the translations were true. They weren't. None of the translations were true. None of them. Not one. And basically, they had him saying the opposite of what he said, except in the very first one, which was him. And he stood up and he said, I had nothing to do with 911. I wish I did. I wish I could say right now, I had something to do with 911, but I did not. But I want to say good work to all of you, people who have the same spirit as Al-Qaeda that want to kill all Americans. And so he patted them all on the back. But then the ones after that, I think it was 5 or 6, 5 after that, it was a different person speaking each and every time. We did, and this was all over the internet, people did facial analysis. It wasn't him. They did voice analysis. It wasn't him. As a matter of fact, they didn't even use the same double twice. So there were approximately 6 or more doubles for Osama bin Laden. I mean, his beard will be dark after it has white in it. This scrawny old guy dying from, he had kidney disease. He had to be on dialysis, for heaven's sakes.
Well, why is Michael Moore coming out trying to change the narrative right now? Are we getting close to something that the FBI wants us to look another way?
John Kerry probably went and made sure to pay him out of his pocket to cover up the Iran scandal, which is now coming unraveled. We'll go there in a minute. Osama bin Laden absolutely had kidney disease, and he was dying. He didn't even have the power to hold up an AK-47 in the first films. It would almost knock him over. because he was so weak. And yet then we're supposed to believe he gained a lot of weight afterwards and lived for a decade beyond that.
In a cave.
Oh, everywhere.
With his dialysis machine.
With his dialysis machine in a cave,
can
yes.
Can we kind of go a little fast forward? Because our listeners already know that the 9/11 was treason. It was done by this Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld cabal. They did it to hide financial crimes. And then they used Osama bin Laden as their patsy. And then, of course, when Obama needed a little bump in his numbers, he took out somebody, or who knows, maybe it was a bag of rocks, and gave it a sea burial, and everybody was hooting and hollering because Osama bin Laden was dead. I mean, really.
Okay, Obama and Hillary sitting in the ready room. That wasn't the ready room. Did anybody notice that? And they were watching this supposed attack. We are supposed to believe that Osama bin Laden was taken by helicopters flying into the most secure place in all of Pakistan, 1 mile away from their military academy, in the very compound that is the most secure, the most fortified, and has so many Stinger missiles to take out any helicopters coming anywhere near it or any planes, that all they'd have to do is just get anyone pulling a Stinger out of the closet and taking out these helicopters. And then they land in the compound, one of the most secure compounds. And then they go in and still nobody's shooting at them.
But that's what they do in Hollywood. So they were just following this Hollywood script.
And now, here's why I know that Mike Moore is part of this conspiracy to basically whitewash this once again and cover it up and make it look like Iran was working with Osama bin Laden. Complete nuts. Complete nutcase job for anyone who would say that. First off, it is not possible that we flew helicopters into the most secure place in Afghanistan without a single tiny speck of resistance. That is not possible, folks. And then let's remember that Team 6, the SEAL Team 6, the one guy who's still alive because the others were all taken out in a freak missile accident, that they were all on a helicopter and they all died from a freak missile accident that took them out, as they were ordered to do something that was completely uncharacteristic of what they normally did, and in the daytime. And don't even get me started. So Mike Moore, you sir, have sold out to the very people you say came and held guns against you and intimidated you. They may have, but now you work for them.
Maybe he worked with them all along. We don't know.
I have to assume that the articles that I've read from him, which are 50% correct, 50% wrong, are all simply working on the other side. But I can't say that for sure because I've never met the man, but I can tell you that his information is skewed so bad on this one that there's no way he can get out of it. And the fact that he's running all these articles, which are regurgitating the lies that say that Osama bin Laden was responsible for 9/11. That's who you covering for? Only the Bushes, Robert Mueller, Comey, Andrew, all the same criminals. You've now come out and you're supporting them. Now let's just go back. After they analyzed these films, everybody in the whole world knew that it was a fake and that these films were fake. And that what were you seeing in these films? There were 6 of them in a row where every single one of them had a better script where he says it was him who conducted 9/11. And by the end, he is 100% saying he's 100% responsible and he directed those 18 people personally, and that they're his brothers, and that he conducted it, he constructed it, all from a cave in Afghanistan. Somehow, this doesn't hold together. But when we look at the Saudis who are connected to it, well, we can see that the Bushes obviously worked with the Saudi intelligence. That's why Jamal Khashoggi was killed recently. And it's not a coincidence that all of this is coming up again now. 9/11 is resurrecting because Trump said he would focus on 9/11 and take the enemies down who really did it because he doesn't believe the story. That would be Robert Mueller.
Well, none of us
Cheney.
believe the story.
Right. And so anyone who would believe that story is nonsense. And because, yes, Osama bin Laden did start to send people out after 1989 and 88 and 89 to everywhere to blow up everything. Yes, he did. Why? He hated all Americans. Was the first attempt, the pathetic attempt that barely blew up anything in the World Trade Center, his attempt? Yes, it was. That's the best he could do. That was his best man, his best munitions, his best bombs. It wasn't Osama bin Laden. And for baby Bush to be whispered in his ear while he was reading a book about a little goat to some elementary children in Texas, and happened to have his national security advisor with him and all of his top dogs with him so that they could say they weren't any part of it. He was whispered into his ear by one of his associates that, for maybe 10 seconds, no more than 15 seconds. And then again later, another 15-second whisper in his ear. And then baby Bush came out and declared war on Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and Iraq. Okay, wait a second. Al-Qaeda was never in Iraq. It means the base. It was the base that was in Pakistan, and later we paid for it, Americans paid for it, to move to Afghanistan. And it was literally called the base, Al-Qaeda. We also for us, it was the list, which means the people that we paid to be there. And so for us to listen to this nonsense of Mike Moore of True Pundit is insane. There was a look-alike. One of the doubles of Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan. Was it in the place that they said it was? Probably not. Jalalabad. Was it in that compound? Absolutely not possible. Was it those U.S. Navy SEALs? No, it wasn't. Look at the one guy who's still alive and his crazy stories that he tells. He says he's the one who personally shot Osama. In other words, he's the only one who would lie that big that they let live, who still tells the story. And now I understand he's like a drug addict, alcoholic, crazy person, and so he won't make any more public statements about this, but he brags that he was the one who pulled the trigger and killed. He also said Osama bin Laden was cowered in his room. That's not Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden always had an AK-47 within arm's reach. There is no way that this guy stormed into Osama bin Laden's room after helicopters landed, after they stormed the house, came up 3 flights. No.
It makes a good Hollywood script.
Lie.
But you know what? I'm really getting tired of the government and all their lies. And I'll tell you why. Because now it's spilling over to family and friends in a way that's just not right. For example, I had a family member tell me that they were going back for the second time to see this Pennsylvania field of where the memorial for Flight 93 is. And so as we teach our listeners, we can't red pill people the whole way. So whenever you have an opportunity and somebody might bring up a subject, just give them a little nugget, just a tiny one to think on. And so I asked him, I said, well, why are you going to this? And he goes, well, this is where that plane crashed, had all these people in it on 9/11. I said, no, there wasn't an airplane that flew in there. And I waited, and he said, what? But yes, there was. And I said, no, the coroner came. He couldn't find any body parts, much less suitcases. It was just, who knows, maybe it was a missile. Nobody died in the field in Pennsylvania on Flight 93. Hello?
According to the coroner, look at the first films. First thing he did, he was one of the first ones in and then one of the first ones out. And they asked him literally, where are you going? What are you doing? He said, my work is done here. There are no bodies here. Only, what did he say?
So this family friend,
severed body parts, he said.
Yeah.
In other words, they had strewn body parts around, which the coroner knew had already gone through rigor mortis and had nothing to do with this, what was probably a missile. And the missile, there are 2 witnesses who saw the missile hit. It wasn't a plane. How about what about their testimony?
And so this family member said, well, then what am I looking at when I go out to this field in Pennsylvania, this national memorial? I said, you are looking at a hoax on Americans. That's what you're looking at.
And no plane hit the Pentagon. And we're not going to say what hit the Twin Towers, but everything in the report is fake. As a matter of fact, you know that the 911 Commission report focused more on all of the pre-activities of Osama bin Laden than it did on any of the facts. There were no facts presented in that. That was a story already written about Osama bin Laden because little baby Bush came out and declared war on Al-Qaeda, terrorism, Iraq. Iraq had no Al-Qaeda in it. I will go over this again if people want. Al-Qaeda was sent into Iraq through Syria by the king of Syria. And when they came back into Syria, they became ISIS. They were supported by us and paid for us, by us both in Pakistan and Afghanistan, in Syria and Iraq, and then we paid for ISIS $1 billion a year. It was about it was about $500 million a year we were giving Al-Qaeda, and then it went up to $1 billion a year for just one of the 5 factions that we were supporting in Syria at this point, ISIS, or as Obama always liked to call them, ISIL, because, that's the one he liked best of the 5 that he was supporting. But anyway, going back to this, when the body of Osama bin Laden was buried at sea, which is against all Sharia law.
Well, wait a minute. We don't really know whose body it was or if it was a bag of rocks.
The look-alike. They had a picture that was so
You don't know.
mutilated that there was no way you could have proven anything by that picture.
No, you don't know. These line scum want you to think that Osama bin Laden was responsible for the Twin Towers.
Now, if they were going to take him to the ship to test his DNA, they didn't need to. And why didn't they return it, according to Sharia law, to the people that they should have? If they really had his body and they had confirmation, they didn't need to keep the body, and they certainly didn't need to bury it at sea. Now, was that one of the lookalikes? Sure, it was one of the lookalikes. But Osama bin Laden died probably, he died in a hospital on a kidney, right next to a kidney machine. That's a fact. That's a fact. There was no other way around that. And he certainly didn't live 10 years after he had already been said that he had a fatal kidney disease and his kidneys had failed. Okay? So don't believe that story. Now, let's look at why Mike Moore would tell these big fat lies. Well, first off, Obama. There was $400,000 frozen at the time of the Tehran incident with Jimmy Carter. And it's a lie. Who cares? That $400,000 didn't pay for, the helicopters that were wrecked. But as we know, that was an October surprise staged to get rid of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter thought the CIA was on his side because BCCI had funded him, which is a rogue CIA bank in Pakistan, by the way. The headquarters for the money that came for Jimmy Carter came from Pakistan, folks. BCCI, look it up. Everybody knows it. He was never, ever held to task for this. So we know that when Obama said, well, we're going to take that $400,000 and we're going to give you the full interest rate on it, and we're going to give you 1.7, everybody says 1.78 billion dollars as a return for that. For Michael Moore to say that was the payoff for them keeping Osama bin Laden in a nice place in Iran for 10 years with the approval of America and Saudi Arabia is just absolutely the stupidest thing ever. No, that was money given by Barack Obama so that Iran could give money directly to Hamas, Hezbollah, and strengthen the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which has then poured those weapons into Iraq, into Syria, into Lebanon, and to the Palestinians. So that was money paid directly. But you got to remember there was much, much, much more money on the table, okay? People don't understand this. There was probably, at least $150 billion on the table because of the sanctions that had been placed on Iran. And also the fact that they had lost so much money during those sanctions. And at that time, there was a secret deal going on. Now, we know that John Kerry had gone in while he was the Secretary of State to Iran and made backdoor deals where he was literally paid under the table. We know this. And we also know that he then made arrangements for 1,500 Iranian spies to come into America. That was part of the deal. So when you're seeing that Iran is hacking America, that's because John Kerry brought those hackers into America. That is the plan. And they got very high positions, some of them, and went straight into government in many cases because supposedly this was some kind of deal he was doing. But he was paid under the table, as we know, because their Minister of Foreign Affairs has come out and said so. He said that literally John Kerry was paid under the table and many others were, and that he would reveal that if John Kerry did not get and force somehow politically Trump from stopping the sanctions. Now, let's look at these sanctions back in the time of Obama, and let's look at what that did. And what was the nuclear deal really all about? The nuclear deal was about the following. Obama was so weak that he thought that if he didn't give nuclear weapons to Iran, that France would, because they always do. France always gives the breeder reactors that create the plutonium necessary for the fissile material in missiles. That's France. Anybody ever mentioned that? All of our enemies really get started with the help of France? Well, that's what was going on in Iran. And France was building a great pipeline that was supposed to come to the advantage of the French and also the Brits, who used to own the oil rights in Iran. Okay? They were in on this too. So every time you hear of something needing to be bombed somewhere in the Levant, that would be Syria or Lebanon or Iraq or Iran, because they're going to, they won't do it to Iran because they have vested interest there, the Brits and the French. The intelligence for the last 2 bombings on Syria were from British and French intelligence. It wasn't American intelligence. We didn't find that. We also didn't find any of the gas. As a matter of fact, the first gas attacks have been found not to have even happened once it took a long, long time for them to be studied. But that's Britain and France. In Iran, they're not our friends. They're our enemies. That has been replaced now with Russia and China. Why? Because Obama went in and gave hundreds of billions, certainly more than $100 billion, to Iran to buy all of the missile systems that they needed to turn their centrifuge plants into super centrifuge plants, which is what we've now discovered. The second that that Trump put sanctions on Iran, what did Iran do? Well, nani boo-boo. We have super centrifuge plants that we've had going all along, and we are producing uranium like crazy, enriched uranium, and tough luck. Okay, well, that proved what Trump said. Don't believe what Bibi Netanyahu said, that, he found these plans that they've continued to build bombs or want to build bombs, or he found these other things. A lot of that is nonsense. But yes, those centrifuge plants have been underground, not the ones that Netanyahu found recently. They have never stopped for one moment, and everyone knows that because they refuse to let them be looked at. Okay? So Iran has never once for 1 second backed off of wanting a nuclear bomb. Now, they have enough bombs from what they just bought with the money that Obama gave them to provide Syria with all the bombs they need to wipe out Israel. They don't need a nuclear bomb. And so they are so packed full of bombs now, not only to defend Iran from Israel, and particularly Tehran, but also they've done oil deals with Iran and China. And Kerry was trying to make sure that the oil deals go to Europe, and that's the reason that he was doing these backdoor deals, because it was obvious that France and Britain, and subsequently then Europe and America, pushed out of Iran. They were lying about the nuclear weapons, and then Iran started to be best friends with Russia and China, and literally, the first day that we put sanctions on, the bombs, the embankments of bombs, huge amounts of missiles went in to Iran the very next day. It's not going to stop. And Saudi Arabia hates them. Those bombs ended up in Yemen, and they were bombing. Missiles were flying from Yemen daily towards the Saudi Arabians, towards the Saudis, right? Those were Iranian bombs bought by Obama. So what is really going on here? I believe Michael Moore is trying to say that he tried to help Mueller and others get one of the spies out of Iran. There were many spies in Iran, and many of them got compromised. And so he's saying that he was part of that, and that during all of that, he found out the truth about Osama bin Laden being in Iran. No. Peter Strzok's dad ran the rogue CIA and ran and helped assist in the nuclear proliferation of materials necessary to make bombs in Iran. Everybody should know this by now, and if you don't, then you're not paying attention, okay? The CIA overthrew the previous Persian rulers and planted Muslim rulers in Iran. I mean, does anybody not know that? Look at your history. The Pahlavis and the whole peacock throne, that was the rogue CIA. They were still there. They were helping the radical Islamic terrorists. So to say that when they got kicked out because Iran finally said, we're not going to be controlled by the rogue CIA. Yeah, they kept some of those agents. And to say that Mike Moore helped get them out of Iran, complete nonsense. We know Oleg Deripaska did. Oleg Deripaska came and worked directly with John Brennan and the CIA and the FBI counterintelligence division to try to extract some of these people. That's been in the news recently. But when we look at Iran, we have to see that it was an Obama attempt to continue the radical Islamic takeover of the world. And that's the reason he bombed those 7 Muslim countries, so that he would create 60 million Muslim refugees, many of which are radical Islamic terrorists. So it's all part of the plan. But we are destroying that plan right now with Trump. And what Trump is doing is basically just annihilating. Look at the way that Angela Merkel tried to cheat. And in the end, they did cheat. They created a third party to shuffle money from the European Union, particularly Germany, directly to Iran right now during the sanctions.
Yes, I know. And that's a different weed patch. Okay, we got to stay with the Michael Moore story and True Pundit, because this is a big deal. Because if he doesn't walk this back and correct it, then for me, he is forever fake news and also fake history. And we should not be looking at his site if he can't correct this major error.
I was just on his site, and half the articles are about this garbage.
Well, and it seems to have started lately where a lot of this trash is coming from.
And this man doesn't tell the truth. He is not telling the truth. He is telling the old lies in a new form so that he can make some money, I guess, off of his book and claim that he took down the FBI in his pajamas. I'm sorry, the FBI is worse than ever. Sorry, Mike Moore. You're kind of like Michael Moore. It's just your propaganda disinformation. But remember, Michael Moore, the movie maker, every once in a while is 100% on Trump's side.
You mean the flop maker? Now he's
Jabba the Hutt, yes.
Yeah.
Jabba the Hutt is sometimes on Trump's side.
All right, now let's go on into the Rod the Rat.
Rat Rodenstein is so nervous right now.
He's losing hair. Have you seen recent pictures of him?
Oh,
yeah.
He is
losing hair. He's going to lose his life.
Look, we said from the beginning that he was the weak chain, the link in that chain, because he's never done a good job. He's been Mueller's step and fetch it boy. He's been Comey's bunk buddy. And it's all good, the training they've done for him, but he is not high-quality globalist lawyer fixer material. He is an idiot. Look at each one of his testimonies. He's perjured himself so many times that now anything he says he's going to perjure himself.
He's like a tier 2 or 3 player on a team, isn't he?
He's a soy boy, yeah. He's pure.
And now they have to rely on him.
He's like that football player, quarterback who didn't get put out on the field, and so he decided to, start a revolution because.
Okay, let's get back to Rat.
He didn't get called on. He was on the bench.
Come on, let's get back to Rat.
Rat Rodenstein should have stayed on the bench.
Remember, his wife is very powerful. In fact, Rat is probably there because of his wife, Lisa Barsumian. She's that high-powered attorney that takes on all the cases for the senior executive service.
Oh, yeah. CIA, FBI, Clinton's, Bush's, whoever it is, she steps up, and she will step up this time if it turns into a lawsuit. She will represent these evil dudes, no matter, and say there is no conflict of interest that happens to be her husband she's defending. But anyway, Rat is in a predicament. Rat already said he wanted to quit 5 times so that they couldn't talk to him anymore, because every time he talks, he perjures himself. Each perjury is 5 years in prison. He's perjured himself more times than I can count. He's perjured himself as much as Comey. And remember, they're bunk buddies. But anyway, Rat was chosen, of course, to be the person to continue the group for impeachment, the insurance policy, the Crossfire Hurricane counterintelligence attack. This is a black ops operation, folks. This is an attack upon our government. And so when Rat Rodenstein was then called in, it was the weak point. And we said it was going to be the weak point. We said he is the guy who could fall because he just doesn't have the guts. He doesn't have the balls for it, to be quite frank about it. He just doesn't. He's like Jeff Sessions. Just no guts, no strength, no nothing. They can't stand up for anything. They just come and they dissemble. That's all they ever do. Now, Rat Rodenstein, what's going to happen with him? 5 times he's quit. 5 times they said no, because he is going to be questioned. He refused to come to be questioned by the Congress recently, but now he's going to be. And so his lies that he says he did not wiretap the president, when we now have Andrew McCabe, James Baker, and others who say, oh, no, he absolutely did. That was a very serious plan. He was going to tape him, tell him crazy things, try to get Trump to go off, and then use the 25th Amendment saying he's insane and use this tape, which would not have been admissible in a court, to extort cabinet members to make it look like they're the ones who put the idea of the 25th Amendment impeachment of Trump on the table in the cabinet. But of course, he had to have extortion because of Pence. Only Pence can do that. And so I suggest that not only Nikki Haley was being extorted by Rod Rosenstein, who's very, very common. It's a common practice of his to extort people, just like he tried to extort Devin Nunes, threaten their security staff who were working on the Nunes memo. He's threatened all kinds of people. Trey Gowdy, he's threatened them with insane things, and he's threatened even the Congress. When he was being interviewed by Trey Gowdy, he actually made some threats to the very Congress itself, saying that they better not do this, they better not do that, and the group asking him questions, the committee better not do this or that. So Rat Rodenstein is not being allowed to quit. He's not giving over the materials that the Congress, who does oversight, they're his boss too, as well as Trump. He refuses to give them the material. He refuses to unredact it. He refuses to give out the text messages. He has refused to give out all these things. He's a criminal par excellence, but he came to make sure that the Robert Mueller investigation turned into an impeachment, which it has not, or turned into an embarrassment in the midterms, which it has not, or stayed the course for 4 years until they, at the next election in 2020, could try to continue to defame and accuse Trump and basically try to erode his support and smear him. Well, Rat Rodenstein is behind all of that. It was an illegally appointed counsel. The conflict of interest was astounding for 1,000 reasons. It was illegally appointed. It was illegally defined, the definition of going after someone for conspiracy to collude. It doesn't even exist. There is no such thing.
It's an extension of covering up this whole 9/11 stuff. That's why Mueller's in place.
That's exactly where I was going. In the
I
end,
just got you there faster.
I know.
Because you know what, we need to wrap it up. Right.
I take a long time sometimes because there's so many details, juicy details.
Yes.
So Rosenstein goes back to the beginning in the early 90s with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and the whole group down there in Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, Arkansas. So he's been around a long time, but he's just never been very clever, and he's never done that much, really, for the deep state. This is, and the shadow government, this was his big SES assignment, okay? And he's blown it. He's blown it. The whole thing he's done with Manafort may completely crumble. The judge is not being kind to him, and Robert Mueller, in his side cases, as well as Robert Mueller is a total embarrassment. All he keeps doing is indicting non-existent Russians. So, Rosenstein, you've already failed your task because you have admitted at least 4 times in public that the investigation absolutely, though it's not over, has found no collusion with Trump, no connection with Trump's team in Russia at all, no obstruction of justice with Trump and Comey's firing, and yet they probably gave Comey immunity. So when Rat Rodenstein goes down, and I believe he's going to be taken down by James Baker, it's all going to fall.
And what about this Bruce Orr situation? And now Nellie Orr won't testify because Bruce is my husband. Well, why are all these people married to spouses that also hold positions within the cabal? They're also senior executive service, all covering up, sleeping around with each other, covering up their crimes.
Because lawyers know that spouses can't testify against them. And that's why Lisa Barsumian is in the position she's in. She can never testify what she knows of the legal activities of her husband, and vice versa. He can't testify against her. Doesn't have to.
So they're a little cabal, a criminal cabal themselves, this husband and wife team. And it goes, it's Bill and Hillary team. I mean, on and on. I mean, look at Elaine Chao and McConnell. They're just all these husband and wife teams that seem to be wrapped up in a lot of criminality.
If the slow process of looking at these things as they come into the light lead to indictments, Nellie and Bruce will go down. But that's only if the SES loosens its control, because Bruce Orr is one of the top people in the SES. Nellie was in the CIA working in the open source works platform, basically probably from the CIA, working for John Brennan, already spying on Trump, already gathering the information they needed for the Russian dossier, which was written with help by Glenn Simpson. But, people right now are saying that good old George Webb was the first one to say that there are 3 dossiers. No, incorrect. There were more than 3 dossiers. There were many more than 3 dossiers. And when you combine all of them together, then you get what was the Christopher Steele dossier, which had already had input by the DNC, by Cody Shearer, who wrote his whole part, which had then the Secretary of State division and Kerry and his part, which came through Victoria Nuland, which that was the what they called the PP accusations, okay? The blatant outright nonsense was Cody Shearer, which was from the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. The accusations of the horrors came from a telephone call to Victoria Nuland, which she never reported as intelligence, directly from probably one of the Chalupa sisters and the call supposedly came from Ukraine. When John Brennan heard this call, he got involved and got kind of late involved because John McCain was involved from January. So there was already the Senate Intelligence Committee dossier that was being created by Dianne Feinstein, Richard Burr, and Mark Warner. And sorry to have to say it, but Rubio too, and the others in that committee. And they were already working through Adam Waldman, talking directly to Christopher Steele, where they have letters going back and forth.
Not only that, they had their staffer, James Wolfe, spilling the beans to Allie Watkins, the reporter. I mean, people, this is just outright leaking.
And then, of course, Bruce Orr had his direct connection with Christopher Steele, and he gave all the information he could from the Department of Justice. So, Secretary of the Department of State, the Department of Justice, the FBI. We know that the FBI was directly connected by Peter Strzok, who was involved as the go-between. And now we know that James Baker, who was in the same group with Peter Strzok and Comey and Andrew McCabe, were in direct contact with Michael Schussman and Eric Elias from Perkins Coie, who
Isn't
hired...
that Mark Elias?
Mark Elias, who hired Fusion GPS. And they were all working together. But that was yet still not the end of the dossier. Then you have the accusations against Carter Page and the whole setup there. Well, that was Comey's dossier, which when he couldn't get the FBI to find anything as they did their investigation on Trump and his dad, he simply made it up. Felix Sater, Sergei Milian, on and on and on. There were like 6 dossiers all mixed together into that one dossier. So George Webb didn't reveal nothing that we all didn't know already. So thanks, George does good work. But to keep giving him credit for being the person who pointed out the other dossiers, he hasn't even pointed out the people in those agencies who were part of those dossiers.
Well, that's what disinformation or, they just or spin doctors do. They want to keep you in the narrative and the spin that never takes you forward. So they may tell you part of the truth, but they never take you the whole way, the full truth.
Rat Rodenstein is going to have to step down because he's not going to be able to answer questions anymore. And when he steps down, he has failed his task. He has failed everything. He's failed all of his bunk buddies. He's failed them all. And then look for him. As soon as James Baker seeks immunity, Rat Rodenstein will seek immunity. Mark my words. Rat Rodenstein will turncoat, and he will be the one who will then give out the information that we need. But he didn't sign... He says he didn't sign the FISA warrants. Remember that? But James Baker certainly did tell them to sign them. And he said he didn't read this FISA warrant, the 4th application on Carter Page for the Title 1702. He said he didn't read it. And he didn't read it because it was never went to a hearing. It was an application. But you can be guaranteed. So therefore, he can't tell you what was in it. But you can... That's the way he covers himself. That's Rat's way of covering himself, as being uninformed. But James Baker was fully informed, and if he seeks immunity, then Rat and his old gang of rats, the wharf rats and the swamp rats, will all go down.